Hello. Welcome, 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 everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to Know You Tell It What I Know. This is not only our first live show of 2022, it's our first live stream show ever. I'm very excited about that. Do take a moment to silence your cell phones, but you will be on camera, but that doesn't mean that we don't encourage like hooping and, clapping and laughing, maybe not booing, but, all the things that a regular audience does. And I just want to give a special shout out to Culture Lab LIC and for Ed Joe for making this all so pretty tonight. So much production value, right? Very excited. And we're celebrating Women's History Month. Happy International Women's Day Eve. It's tomorrow on the 8th. And we have the four storytellers that you're going to meet tonight, met each other a few weeks ago, and they've been working together, developing their stories inspired by the theme, What I Know, on the page. And tonight they are going to take the stage and step into each other's experience to, perform each other's stories for you. And before that happens, I just want to take a moment. It's just thank you so much for coming out tonight. Things are so difficult right now, locally and globally, and what a privilege to just sit in a room together and share in each other's stories and share in all the hard work that these four storytellers have put into not only developing the tales on the page, but embodying each other's experience. And those are the kind of empathetic connections that we need right now, right? 2+ years into whatever this, I don't know, I hate the term new normal, but whatever we're struggling to put together. So just a big round of applause for everybody, even before we start. Our first two storytellers tonight are Julia Granacki and Hannah Leland. I'm gonna call them up to the stage. Julia's gonna sit in the writer's seat. Hannah, I'm gonna have you sit right here. I'm gonna hog your mic for a little bit first. I also want to call up, we have a very special, this is the first time in Know You Tell It history, we have a guest coach and a guest director, and it's our friend Marco Staffney. A Know You Tell It alum, and some of you that were here when we did our show in September at Culture Lab, you recognize him as a storyteller. So before we hear Hannah tell Julia's story, we like to get to know the author a little bit. We also love to leave them up on the stage so that you get to watch their story being performed live for the first time. But I'm going to turn things over to Marcos to just interview Julia. I'm very excited to see what you came up with.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and a huge round of applause for Kelly Jean Fitzsimmons, who has put all of this together with a very small but impactful team. Julia, 10 years. You and I have both been doing this for 10 years.
We sure have.
Right. And what do you think has changed in the 10 years that you've done this process of Know You Tell It?
Well, I was saying earlier that I met my husband about 10 years ago, and he came to my first show. And he's out there watching, so.
Taking advantage of the live stream. Know You Tell It, helping
That's
with
right.
dates for forever. Julia, you are a co-host of an amazing podcast called Circling the Drain with your co-host Ellie Dvorkin, who is also in the audience. This is an amazing podcast. I always feel slightly funny as the dude who recommends this podcast for everybody because it's about perimenopause and women in their 40s to 50s, right?
Yeah. Midlife.
Midlife.
Sure.
This is a great podcast. Everybody should listen to it. You learn so much, just the wealth of people that you bring on the show. And in this podcast, you always ask a couple of questions at the end. And you ask women of a certain age what they would tell their 30-year-old self.
Yes.
Yes? I would like to know, what would you tell your 12-year-old self?
12. Oh, my goodness. I think I would tell my 12-year-old self to not take everything so seriously. I was a very serious 12-year-old. I know people who know me out there, they're really shocked by that. Yeah, not to take myself too seriously.
All right. A little
At
left.
12, I mean, that's as a teen. Oh, my God.
You may have to journal a lot when you're 12.
Yeah.
All right. Well, without further ado, we're going to hear No One Told Me, written by Julia Granacki, told by Hannah Leland.
No one told me. I was bundled up, gloved up, and masked up at the grocery store, standing in line to place an order at the deli, when I felt a strange sensation in my belly, a warmth I had never felt before. That warmth rose through my chest, widening into a red-hot laser beam shooting out the top of my head. I was suddenly and without warning drenched in sweat. In that moment, it took all of my self-control to not rip off my mask and clothing and run naked into the parking lot to bathe myself in the cool winter air. Then, as suddenly as this sensation arrived, it was gone. I took a tissue out of my purse and covertly lowered my soaking wet mask to wipe the sweat from my face. Oh my God, I thought. Did I just have a hot flash? But I'm only 44. Old crones have hot flashes. Not me. I'm too young for that. Fuck. I must have COVID. In the winter of 2020, like so many other people, I was caught off guard by some things I was unprepared to navigate. Depression, anxiety, and weight gain were just to name a few. COVID was the perfect shitstorm in that it offered a slew of undefined symptoms that we were learning about daily, where each hour one was made to wonder, do I have COVID or am I depressed? Do I have COVID or is it my allergies? Am I shitting myself because I have COVID or did I eat too many Cheez-Its? In my case, I was thinking, I'm so hot and sweaty that my vagina feels like a swamp. I don't have a fever, but could this be COVID? When did I develop rosacea? Is this a COVID thing? I can't sleep at night and my anxiety is through the roof. Is this COVID-induced insomnia? I wanted to make an appointment to see a doctor, but during the first few weeks, even months of lockdown, this was impossible as offices weren't pivoting to telemed quite yet. So I was stuck doing my own research, going down the deep rabbit butthole of the internet, only to discover that I did not have COVID. I wasn't sick and I wasn't dying, but I was certainly suffering. I was suffering from perimenopause. Perimenopause, as defined by the Mayo Clinic, means around menopause, and refers to the time during which your body makes the natural transition to menopause, marking the end of the reproductive years. The average time for perimenopause lasts about 4 to 7 years, but could be as long as 14. You heard me right. 14 years. No one told me. No one told me that my midlife would be marked by the onset of depression, anxiety, weight gain, tit pain, brain fog, poor libido, and an inability to process and cope with stress, with no clear guidelines on how to navigate any of it, coupled with a pandemic. If the female species were a union, this is where I'd ask to file a complaint, a grievance for the lack of guidance and information provided to all women during such a vulnerable and confusing time. The fact is that people with penises have been deciding for years as to what is covered and not covered regarding women's health during a future doctor's medical education. Women's health is primarily viewed through the lens of reproduction and focuses on a woman's fertile years. Anything outside of that scope gets little to no attention. Luckily, I had a great doctor that I couldn't wait to see. The moment my gynecologist began seeing patients over telemed, I made my appointment. I was relieved to talk to her, not only because I was certain she would offer solutions, but I was excited to chat and see how she was doing. This doctor was someone I had grown to adore over more than a decade of care. She helped me navigate birth control, ovarian cysts, polyps, fibroids, and surgery. She was with me through boyfriends and breakups and marriage. I've known her longer than I've known my husband. When I logged into the session, I was happy to see her smiling face. She was seated in her office with the "Hang in there" cat poster on the wall behind her. After we exchanged some pleasantries and got caught up on how we were coping with the pandemic, I explained to her what was going on. Instead of being met with a bevy of questions followed by options, her usual MO, I was met with a shoulder shrug and a sigh as my doctor asked, "You might be starting menopause, but you're a bit young for that." Later, I would find this statement to be false. She then offered me a slew of meds, starting with the birth control pill, knowing that I had been on and off it for most of my adulthood, never really adjusting to it properly. "Okay, well, how about an antidepressant?" she asked. "But I'm not depressed. What about HRT? I've read that a lot of women respond well to it," I replied. "You're too young for that. It's only offered to women in menopause. You could try some black cohosh," she said. "What's that?" I asked. "A supplement," she said. "Does it work?" I asked. "I've heard it can be helpful with hot flashes," she said. I rolled my eyes and thought, what is this, the 1700s? Is this all we have to offer? Supplements, snake oil, and ointments? I wanted to rip that stupid cat poster off the wall and shove it down her throat, screaming, "You hang in there, bitch!" Aggression is also a symptom of perimenopause. Feeling there was no other real option, I reluctantly followed her recommendation and started a low-dose birth control pill, and it made all my symptoms worse. However, I was committed, so I kept at it for 3 months because 3 months is somehow the magic number where things are supposed to work. In the end, my doctor agreed that this treatment was going nowhere and told me to stop taking the pill immediately. And that was that. No other solution was offered. No one told me to prepare myself for the following dumb fuckery. Number 1, that the OBGYN I had been seeing for over a decade would have little to no interest in guiding me through the transition out of my fertile years. Number 2, while some herbs and supplements have science-based evidence for the treatment of perimenopausal symptoms, black cohosh is not one of them, yet people keep offering it to women as a cure-all. Number 3, the medical community still cannot get its facts straight about the safety and efficacy surrounding hormone replacement therapy and when it should be used. Feeling deflated, alone, and confused by this disappointing experience with my gynecologist, and the fact that it wasn't exactly a good time to start looking for a new doctor, I asked myself, what would a wise woman do? This is a mantra I always come back to when I'm faced with a difficult situation. It's meant to precipitate the realization that wisdom is innate. I started reaching out to like-minded women friends of the same age, and much to my surprise, we were all quietly experiencing a lot of the same issues. Many of them were offered antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and addictive sleep aids as the first course of treatment, or they weren't offered anything at all and were met with a sort of, "you'll get over it" reaction. No one told me to expect this kind of disappointment with doctors. When you ask a woman my age how they're doing, you rarely get the truth. In fact, even when a doctor asks a woman how they're doing, you rarely get the facts. It's not because the woman is trying to be deceitful, but we have been taught to pivot and cope so often that even when we're barely functioning, we say we're doing fine because that's our new normal. We adapt. We say to ourselves, "This is my life now." No one told me about this quiet suffering and the devastating invisibility that can accompany midlife. This was when I got into witchcraft. The female reproductive system is part science and part magic. For example, luteinizing hormone triggers the release of the egg from the ovary. That's science. But did you know that women can sync their menstrual cycle to the cycle of the moon? That's pure magic. I wanted to know more about that side of things. I started by reading books and following practitioners on social platforms whose vibe reflected a loving connection to community and nature. I'm not sure when women decided that we are separate from the natural world instead of one with nature, but I really began to explore that concept. I started by learning the ritual of grounding. I might have even bought a crystal or 5. In addition to my meditation practice, the ritual of grounding was really working for me, but I wanted more. Then one sleepless night, I was doom scrolling through Instagram, and I got sucked into a post about Hecate. Hecate is the chief goddess presiding over magic and spells. She is also called the triple goddess, representing all stages of a woman's life: maiden, mother, and crone. This concept rocked me. I was a maiden at one time for sure. I'm not a mother, but I firmly believe that motherhood is inherent in every woman and takes on many forms. Crone is where it gets tricky. For many, it has a negative connotation. You think old, withered lady living in a shack in the woods, or more realistically, your elderly neighbor with all the cats who keeps putting the trash out on the wrong day. Not many people think of the true crone, a mystical, powerful, wise woman. Back in the before 4 times, she would have been the shaman, the healer, the keeper of history through storytelling, the elder of the tribe, and the person the community counted on for her knowledge. She appears in stories across the continents from Norse myth to traditional Cuban folklore, but her importance has been tragically forgotten. No one told me, but I promise you, these were the women we burned at the stake. It was rare to live past your 30s, let alone your 40s, so you know these bitches were definitely suffering from menopause, and were probably murdered for giving out black cohosh. Thus began my journey of tapping into my inner crone. Turns out she is pretty wise and fierce, and she doesn't tolerate a lot of bullshit. When middle-aged women say they no longer care about what other people think, it's because they're tapping into their inner crone. With that, I shifted my wisdom mantra slightly and asked myself, What would the crone do? She would start by listening. I wanted to hear what other women were experiencing, and I wanted them to feel seen and heard. Next, my inner crone sought knowledge. Women are 50% of the population, damn it, and we need answers. There's a lot of contradictory information and research out there about perimenopause, but I read it all. Much like the storyteller and keeper of knowledge in the tribe, I wanted to share it with my community, and what better way to do that than start a podcast? Lastly, I sought healing. My inner crone is a persistent bitch, and she drove me to find a doctor who would prescribe hormone replacement therapy, and I finally began to experience some relief. No one told me that this would be my midlife passion and mission. No one told me that there would be an entire community of women out there ready to build each other up. No one told me we had strength in numbers. No one told me I would embrace getting older, and that I could tap into my inner crone. No one told me how much I would look forward to meeting her, to becoming her, to knowing her strength, magic, and wisdom.
You can all switch now. Thank you. Hugs, hugs, hugs. All right. Wow, it was great. Great story, Julia. One more round of applause. That was so good. That was a great reading. Oh my gosh. So Hannah, you are both a math teacher and a comedian.
Yes.
What is so funny about math?
Nothing. That's why I have to do both.
Okay. All right. Do you have a favorite math problem?
Oh my God. The quadratic formula is a go-to.
Standard, right?
Just kind of right off the
POG.
top of my head. Yeah.
So you are new to the Know You Tell It process,
Yeah.
and it was great that you were paired with Julie, who's a 3-time alum of being
Yeah.
in this. What was surprising to you about entering into this process of a group of writers?
I felt so supported by all the writers and the story directors throughout the whole process, and everybody's advice helped me get my story to a point that I felt really proud of. So I was expecting to feel supported, but I definitely was also pleasantly surprised by just how strong the community felt.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to hear your story.
Me too.
And here we are. Next up, we have Finally Arriving, written by Hannah Leland, told by Julia Granacki.
Finally arriving. At 13, womanhood was a bold horizon line in the foggy distance, and I ran towards it. Longing to be a woman full-fledged in her femininity, I made Bath & Body Works fragrance my beacon. In the middle school girls' locker room, I walked through perfume ghosts and waited for confidence to hit. Enchanted, Twilight Woods, warm vanilla sugar. I smelled amazing. But it wasn't enough. My limited 2 training bra was too big on me, but I was already itching to outgrow it. Have you ever cried because you're a 32A? It's very destabilizing. One night, my mom came to my bedroom to say goodnight and found me torn up over my tiny tatas. Through tears, I asked her when my boobs were gonna grow. And of course, my mom, big-breasted and big-hearted though she was, couldn't tell me. By freshman year of high school, my band size no bigger, I Googled enhancement supplements. Fenugreek, milk thistle, wild yam. I was ready for any and all side effects. I needed to feel like a woman. I didn't end up buying anything, but those searches burned a hole in my Google history, marking a time when I imagined that being a woman what being a woman meant, and felt my distance from it. Today, 10 years and 2 new pronouns later, I feel the same distance. But I'm not scared anymore. Most of the trans narratives available to me as a young person chronicled someone's journey from self-hatred and discomfort to firm conviction and self-actualization. I love that for them, but these stories, much like the experiences of cis women, left me alone in my feeling of irresolution. As Cole, a trans character in ABC's hit family drama The Fosters, says, "At least I know myself." In the media, trans stories center certainty. And it makes sense. For a demographic whose identity is in constant question, certainty is a life raft. I remember watching YouTube videos of Jazz Jennings, the young trans vlogger, describe her lifelong attachment to womanhood. She cataloged a childhood affinity for girly garments and a constant sureness that she was a girl. Even then, before I'd entertained the notion I could become anything but a cis woman, I recognized that Jazz felt something I didn't. She knew something I didn't. She had arrived. I hadn't. Jazz's story and others like hers turned my bigger boobs expedition on its side. Jazz felt certain in her gender long before receiving any kind of gender-affirming surgery. As a teenager, looking up to Jazz meant understanding that the boobs don't make the woman. So, what was woman? And how could I tell if I had it? Though I wouldn't answer these questions for years, it's not like I spent the time in between feeling pain, despair, or even discomfort about my gender identity or expression. A lot of what I yearned for in middle school was self-confidence, pure and simple. I found it in many places. I wore platform heels to high school and purple Converse to the Women's March. Every part of my body always felt like mine, and I worked hard to treat my body as my home. But I hit a snag in December of 2019. Getting dressed for a winter gala at Barnard College, I realized that the idea of wearing a dress put a pit in my stomach, and that the idea that I didn't want to wear a dress caused me significant distress. All of a sudden, I was hanging on the edge of a cliff. What would happen if I let go of the feminine tools that had always felt inextricable from my identity? Who would I be? For the first time, I leaned into the uncertainty instead of away from it. I let myself wonder about myself without any assumptions. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place about a year later. Over disgusting espresso martinis, I confided in a non-binary friend. "Well, how do I know for sure?" I asked. "How can I tell?" I was waiting for a message in a bottle to tumble out of the ocean. I was waiting for a trans flag to fall out of the sky and engulf me. I was waiting for the sorting hat to say Gryffindor. No, wait, this one's gender non-conforming. My friend pointed out that if I was waiting for these things, I wanted them to happen. And if I wanted them to happen, it was true. I had arrived. Today, I'm a high school math teacher, and students use they pronouns when referring to me. And I'm teaching TikTok-era kids with their finger on the pulse. I'm teaching trans kids who show up to monthly LGBT affinity club meetings and sit quietly. I can't make these kids like math, but maybe I can help them feel seen, and then maybe they'll do their geometry homework in the name of queer community and allyship. Embracing my non-binary gender identity has made it easier to enjoy the moments when I do feel like a woman. When I get just a little drunk on a Thursday. When I solve the daily crossword. When I wear a blazer to an interview. When I inspire the female students in my math class. When I keep a secret. Womanhood and femininity run through me like rivers. These days, my perfume is more subtle: musk, rose, orange peel. I dot small circles on my wrists, behind my ears, between my 32A boobs. Now I know they are the right size. I know that my gender identity and expression are in constant flux. And I know that my body is not a mirror of these things, but a vessel for them. Like how a cup can hold any kind of juice. I used to long for the day that I'd arrive at my gender, that I'd close the gap between me and the horizon. Now, I know I have arrived, and that I'll continue to arrive over and over again. The horizon, as it turns out, is not a bold line at all, but an unfolding world, infinite in its possibilities and in its mystery.
All right, thank you so much, Julia and Hannah. That was a wonderful reading, an amazing story. Yes, one more big round of applause. So great. One thing that has arrived that I forgot to say at the beginning is that in our 10th year here, Know You Tell It has served, and I think we just hit the 160th mark, 160 artists over 10 years. And that is a really important fact. So I just want to congratulate that. Been a lot of people who have been here throughout all of it. I want to introduce Erica Iverson, who is the story coach and director for the next two stories that we're about to hear. So Erica, come on up.
Thank you all so much for coming. Tonight is really special for me. As long as I can remember, there was a poster in my basement that was a reprint of a Cuban poster proclaiming La Dia Internacional de la Mujer. And now it's hanging in my living room in Brooklyn. My mom was a second wave feminist with all of the mostly good things that went along with that. And now as my feminism has grown and changed to include the wide spectrum of gender and sexuality, I am so grateful to be a part of something as special as Know You Tell It. I have been here for most of the shows, and I was involved in the very first one as a storyteller, and basically went up to Kelly Jean afterward and said, "We have to keep doing this. We will keep doing this." So now I would like to welcome to the stage our next two storytellers, Sheria Mattis and Michele Carlo. Sheria, you get to join me here. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. After doing 2 story meetings on Zoom, we finally got to meet each other yesterday in person. So exciting. So I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you are a woman in comedy.
Yes.
Do you have a story about either a triumph or a smackdown, as my college friends used to refer to it, the Heisman? Someone
Yes.
giving you the Heisman as a woman in comedy.
Yes. I think, okay, so I have a little, because like being, especially like a black woman in comedy, a femme woman in comedy in particular, people don't really take me seriously as a comic, or they don't believe that I'm a comic a lot of the times.
Mhm.
Like, I literally got a lot of like, "You're not a comic. You're not a comic." Like, I could literally be on stage telling jokes, and somebody's gonna be like, "Wait, you a comic?" Like, yes, that's what I'm doing. So I got a lot of like, I got a little like bullying from the broke dusties in the comedy community, and one particular broke dusty outside of the Grizzly Pear. I mean, Hannah knows that's like the worst place. It's like the butthole of New York comedy, and like I got like really like bullied, like really like in my face bullied about the fact that I even was a comic. And then months later, I started winning competitions, and I started getting like booked more, and I saw one of those, the worst broke dusty on the train, and I was drunk. And so I basically just told him about himself. And
Yes.
it was
And we're
beautiful.
glad you did. As you should, as you should. Well, we're excited to hear your story. Knowing is Half the Battle, written by Sheria Mattis and read by Michele Carlo.
Knowing is half the battle. I used to think I knew my body, especially my pussy and all its accoutrements. I took some health classes. Oh, I know all about the clitoris, the cervix, and all the turkey giblets inside. But while I was walking around feeling cocky about my pussy, they were in there, just sitting in my uterus, listening, plotting, scheming. I am, of course, talking about my fibroids, the little monsters. Now, if you've got a uterus and you're listening to this wondering, what are fibroids? They're in you. I don't make the rules. These sneaky, bald-headed bitches are in 80% of uteruses, and most people don't even know. They're growths in the uterus that don't cause cancer, and for most people, don't even cause problems. But they had it out for me. Now, while most people's fibroids are grape or pea-sized, mine were the size of grapefruits and eggplants. And if you're thinking, couldn't you feel them? Hasn't that been uncomfortable? Yes, of course I could feel them. And of course they were uncomfortable. But I'm a queer black woman with anxiety. I am always uncomfortable. And I told people constantly. But here's the thing about being a queer black woman with anxiety. It takes a long time for someone to actually hear you. So you eventually learn to become silent. The fibroids, however, would not be silenced. They wanted to be seen, perceived, and ungoverned. They grew so large, I could no longer ignore them. One day, while masturbating, I discovered these no-necked heifers had grown so large, one of them was blocking my cervix. These fibroids had closed my business without even me knowing. So I turned to my primary care physician, Google. And that's when I found out about fibroids. I then went to a Planned Parenthood and was diagnosed by a very understanding black woman after specifically asking her to examine me for them. She explained my options with a calm, knowing bedside manner that would have put anyone at ease, except for me. As soon as she mentioned the various surgeries I would need to remove them, I started bawling. But she assured me that I wouldn't have to have surgery if I didn't want to. I didn't have to fight them. I could just learn to live with them. Take some time to think about what you want to do. There's no need to panic. I immediately panicked. Suddenly, these hateful, dusty skeezers called fibroids became the center of my life. I started doing extensive research. Obviously, by that, I mean doom scrolling at 3 in the morning. And I started to discover all these things that I had been told to stop complaining about were actually worth complaining about. My monthly descents into suicidal darkness, probably not normal. The constant stomach pains, the never-ending peeing, the backaches, the Red Sea periods that look like the scene from The Shining, all of it was being caused by these lumpy, lopsided, evil-ass fibroids. It was like a bad horror movie. The call is coming from inside the uterus. I was ready to fight back. I was ready to take on these fibroids with everything Medicaid had in its arsenal. Then the pandemic hit, and suddenly it was just me and my knock-kneed, no upper lip having ass fibroids. Stuck in the house, no doctors to help me fight them, and a whole lot of apocalyptic stress. They got bigger, and I would say stronger. And by the time COVID restrictions had eased up enough to go to the doctors again, them bitches were on their Hulk shit. The doctors tried everything. I had multiple MRIs where I would hear doctors talk about my uterus like she wasn't right there in the room. They called her gigantic, warped, stretched, extremely large, and just reckless. My uterus is from Bed-Stuy, all right? So I know she wanted to take off her ovaries and fight them. I was given a hormone called Lupron, which gave me menopause symptoms, but did nothing to shrink the fibroids. So I was just walking around, sweating and crying, and still filled to the brim with these doofy-looking balls of misshapen pussy meat. I had an extremely painful procedure called a uterine artery embolization that cuts the blood supply from the femoral artery to the uterine artery. And this is supposed to starve the fibroids so they die. But I woke up during the procedure to one of the radiologists saying, "Oh my God, her uterus is gigantic!" And I politely asked to be put back under. I woke up again to cramps so painful I threw up blood. The pain lasted for weeks, but those fibroids did not die. Those uneven matzo ball built bitches were stubborn. The only procedure left was a hysterectomy, a word that scared the shit out of me when it was first recommended, but that I again knew nothing about. I never wanted biological children, but I still thought of a hysterectomy as a failure, an end to a core facet of my womanhood. My dumbass even asked the doctor if I would grow a mustache after the surgery. After doing a little bit more research and a lot of mulling over, I accepted that it would be the best option for me. Besides, I've been in the queer community long enough to know that a uterus does not make a woman. I found a gynecological surgeon who specialized in laparoscopic hysterectomies on people with large fibroids. I call her the big uterus whisperer. She was kind and gave me lots of information about what was going to happen and when. When she told me I was keeping my ovaries, I sincerely asked if my eggs would drop out of my coochie without the uterus to keep them inside. And she didn't even laugh. She almost did, but she held it in. She was the best surgeon I could have asked for, but I was still pretty sure she was going to kill me on the table. I felt frozen with terror about the prospect of having a hysterectomy, but shaken at the thought of having to lug around a uterus full of tumors for the rest of my life. I couldn't enjoy life just the same. The fibroids were ever present in every moment, and interaction. The fibroids were ever present in every moment and interaction, but I was the only one who was aware of them. Even joyous occasions were hampered by their presence. When I was passed at my first comedy club, the fibroids were there, knocking on my bladder. When I tried to have penetrative sex, they were guarding the door, not letting nothing in. I had prided myself on my power bottom status, and now I couldn't even take strap anymore? These fibroids had blocked my cervix and my blessings. Why was this happening to me? I wanted to fight my fibroids, but these hoes were beating my ass. I knew if there was anyone to blame, it would be my mother. And in a way, I was right. Fibroids are hereditary. My mom had dealt with them her entire adult life, and I had overheard her talking about them with my Aunt Janelle and was promptly told to stop minding grown folks' business. But now that grown folks' business was my business, she felt at ease to share a little story. In her 6th or 7th month of pregnancy, she was told that there was a large fibroid blocking her vaginal canal. There would be no way for the fetus to pass through safely, and no way to remove it without harming the fetus. They would have to terminate. My mom was heartbroken, but just before the termination date came, she felt sudden, throbbing, unbearable pain. She went to the doctor, who discovered her little fetus had grown some big-ass feet and kicked that fibroid right out of the way. And that fetus was me. And you can clap. I think that merits clapping. That's like some superhero stuff. And before you ask, yes, that was extremely painful for my mother. My bad, Mom. But I was born, and now I pay bills and cry in the subway. The point of this story is, this struggle with fibroids was not new. This is an ancient blood feud. I've kicked fibroids' asses before I was even born, and now I need to do it again. I wish I could tell you that this story of fetal triumph inspired me to stomp into the operating room, ready for battle, but that would be bullshit. I was terrified. I walked into the operating room like it was the Green Mile. I sobbed right up until they knocked me out for the surgery. It was a 6-hour procedure that required 2 surgical teams. Apparently, one of my fibroids was clutching my appendix, so they both had to go down together. Some of the surgical tools ripped up my vulva as they were pulling those hard-headed, yuck-mouthed fibroids out of me. They had to give me so many stitches. My pissoir looked like Frankenstein's head. But those ashy-toed, knuckle-looking-ass fibroids were gone. Victory was mine. Clap to her, not me. At my follow-up a month and a half later, I had one thing on my mind. I wanted to see them. I wanted to look those fibroids in the eye and tell them they had lost. My doctor showed me the picture she'd taken after the surgery. There, on a little blue sheet, were my uterus, my tubes, and those backstabbing fibroids. I stared at them, hoping to feel like a victorious conqueror, but instead, I just felt a little bit sad. Have you ever had a mouse in your apartment? The little bastard's been keeping you up, eating your food, and dropping plague turds all over your house for weeks. And then, one day, you catch him. You look at him in the trap, struggling desperately to escape, and you just feel sad for him. You realize he's not the enemy you've made him out to be in your mind. Just a sad, fragile creature, much like you. That's how I felt when I saw those fibroids. They weren't these duplicitous monsters trying to destroy me from the inside out. They were just the reality of my body. They'd been with me for decades, clamoring for attention. Because of them, I had to take my health seriously for the first time in my adult life. And I was able to connect with my mother in ways that we hadn't been able to since I was a child. They even inspired a pilot and some decent jokes. They weren't the enemy I had made them out to be. So I made my peace, apologized for calling them flubber-built bootleg minions, and whispered my final goodbye. This journey isn't over. My pussy is healed, but my relationship with my body still needs work. I have to give myself time and space to reconnect with myself after the trauma of 2 surgeries and a bunch of hormones. I've got a lot of healing to do, but I'm ready for it. So if you're listening to this and you have fibroids, which you definitely do, I don't make the rules, go talk to your gynecologist. Give those knock-kneed, bloated bitches a big old hug, and then kill the shit out of them.
We're so lucky to have these amazing storytellers, and we're at the last story, written by Michele Carlo. She is well known. If you don't know her, you should, in the storytelling scene. She is an actor, an author, a storyteller, and I was so psyched when you said that you were going to, do the show with us, but I was also like, oh, what is she going to think about Know You Tell It? Know You Tell It is a little bit different. When people ask Kelly Jean, is it like The Moth? We always have to say, kinda? So what was your experience with Know You Tell It? How is it different or the same as what you were expecting? What did you come out of it thinking about?
There's a lot of questions there, Erica.
I know. Pick one.
Well, first off, this ain't nothing like no moth. Because the moth is a storytelling slam.
Yes.
You pay your money, you go sit in the room, they pick 10 names out of a hat, and you may or may not get picked.
Yes.
And then it goes on from there. This is different. This is curated. You pick the people that are going to be in it, and you workshop your story for a couple of weeks with the group, and then you read each other's story, which I thought was really cool. I mean, I'm a writer too. Duh, if you're a storyteller, you're a writer too, right? But yeah, I thought it was really great. This is a brand new story. So anyone that's in the audience, I'm looking at you, Jennifer, who's been hearing me tell stories for the past years. This is brand new, and I'm very excited to have Sheria read its debut. I can't think of another person that I would. Well, I can think of, but no. I was going to say your fibroid. I was going to say get one of the fibroids. No. I wasn't going to go there, and I did. Sorry.
We're glad that the fibroids aren't here
Yes,
to read
we're
it.
very glad.
But we're very happy that we will now hear Michele Carlo's story, Viva la Curl-Volution, read by Sheria Mattis.
Let me not cry. Sorry. Let me. You read the shit out of my story. Let me do you justice. Okay.
Mwah.
Viva la Curl-Volution. In the 1970s, my family survived Vietnam, hippies, black power, gay power, women's lib, and the infamous 1977 New York City blackout. But sometimes it seemed my family would not survive my favorite aunt, my mom's youngest sister. Her name was Marisol, but I called her Titi Dulce, sweet auntie. And for some in my family, she was un troublemaker. On the outside, she was like most Latinx women of her generation. She married young and had babies, but she also had another calling: to raise the political consciousness of our family. For those of you who didn't live through it, everything was political in the 1970s. The number of your POW bracelets, the height of your platform shoes, and the texture of your hair, especially the texture of your hair. In my large, proud, and sometimes quite loud Puerto Rican family, you'll find light beige, darker beige, brown, and darker brown members whose hair ranges from pin straight to afro texture. And back in the pre-hippie early 1960s when I was born, it was not uncommon that instead of asking if a new baby had 2 eyes, 10 fingers, and 10 toes, the burning question would be bad hair or good hair. But all hair was good hair to Titi Dulce. Straight, curly, coily, and everything in between. Even though her hair manifesto didn't always sit well with my family. One night after coming over, she went to say goodnight to my mother, found her in the bathroom wrapping her hair, and said, "Lucy, I can't believe you still wrap your hair in those orange juice cans every night. This isn't 1950, you know. Women have choices now. Keeping your curls is an act of protest. You don't need to look more American. We are American." And she tossed her mane of thick, naturally wavy, natural chestnut brown hair and left. "Easy for you to say," said my mom to the closing door. That was the summer I turned 12, when either hormones or Watergate turned my acceptably wavy, light brown, light auburn childhood hair into a tangled bush of wiry orange frizz. No comb could go through it without a half bottle of Herbal Essence conditioner. I could have picked it out with an afro pick were I allowed one, but that implement was forbidden by my mother, whose only sign her father was half Afro-Latino was the jet black, tightly coiled, silky hair she wrapped and ironed into submission daily. As for me, my orange bush was gathered every morning into a tight ponytail circled with a perimeter of barrettes and bobby pins in a futile attempt to tame the frizz. No one in my family had hair like mine. And when I started to go to school again, I found out no one else did either. In those days, public school went from grammar school, K through 6th grade, junior high, 7th through 9th, and then high school. And while the transition from grammar school to 7th grade can be difficult for some kids, it was worse for me because of my hair. I remember Tina and Nisi, Black Pride besties from the projects, who treated me as their pet project. They'd take turns trying to pick out my hair in the locker room before gym class, saying, "Look, it's almost like ours." And then there were Marie and Antoinette, Sicilian-American twins with very curly hair, who at lunchtime would comb out what Tina and Nisi had done and braid me, saying, "Look, it's almost like ours." I accepted their attentions without protest because Tina and Nisi kept razor blades in their afros, and Marie and Antoinette had penny rolls hidden in their scarves. After all, this was the Bronx. So once again, I was almost like everybody and exactly like nobody, just like it was at home. Then one day, after school, Titi Dulce came to pick us up for a shopping trip and found my mother once again struggling to get my crown of shame subdued enough for public consumption. "Lucy, let it go. Let Michelle's hair go free. We have choices now." Easy for you to say when your daughter has perfect hair like you. "Por favor, nena, please sit still." That night, my imperfect self prayed to El Señor, God our Father, to whom I had been taught to turn in times of trouble. "Please, God, please, 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 let me wake up with normal hair so my mom and the kids at school will leave me alone." But the next morning, I woke up with my hair still bright orange, still frizzy, still bushy, and I cried. Because that Monday was the day our class pictures were going to be taken, and I didn't want to look like me. Then, while sitting in front of the TV with my bowl of alphabets, watching Bill Cosby's Fat Albert, the answer to my prayers appeared during the commercial break like a vision of Christ on a cracker. It was called Curl Free, the natural curl relaxer for complete styling freedom, and showed beautiful young women with straight, shiny, submissive, and perfect black, brown, and blonde hair. Well, I bet it works on red hair too, I thought. And I went on a one-child crusade to get my mother to buy and use it on me. And to my surprise, she did. And the next Sunday, she moved a kitchen chair into our tiny bathroom and put on her oldest housecoat and a pair of Playtex Living dishwashing gloves to perform God's miracle on me. But while she mixed it up, I had second, third, and fourth thoughts. For one thing, it stank. Worse than the run-over dead dog I once saw in the street. Worse than the bathroom after my brother used it. Worse than the worst thing you can imagine. And it wasn't just the stench, but the sting. Even though my mother had opened the bathroom and all the other windows in the apartment wide, our eyes teared and we both started sneezing. My father came in from the kitchen, took one look and sniff, grabbed my brother, and ran out the door. I thought I heard him say, "Good luck." Did I say the worst thing was the stink? No. It was the sting. The second my mother combed that horrid potion through my hair, my scalp started to itch, ripple, then burn. "Mommy, How long do I have to have this on? I don't remember what she answered, but about 10 minutes in, I started screaming. My mother bent me over the tub and sprayed me from the shower, saying, "Don't open your eyes or you'll go blind." When I finally dared open them, I almost wish I had gone blind, because a stranger stared back at me in the mirror. Yes, my hair was straight all right, and now half the volume, but it smelled like rotting garbage, and I didn't know who I was anymore. That night, I prayed to El Señor again, saying, "Please, please, please, give me my real hair back." Only El Señor was apparently on holiday, because when I woke up, I was still a smelly, straight-haired stranger. And I cried again. No matter how many times we washed my hair that weekend, or how much Shalimar perfume my mom sprayed over me, the malodor still lingered. And when Monday came, I had to go back to school and take my picture. But before the pictures was gym class, where Tina and Nisi looked at me in shock. "What did you do? You look white now." "My mom made me," I said. I mean, what could I say? That I brought this travesty upon myself? When it was time for the photos, the photographer held a tissue over his nose as I stared straight ahead and tried not to cry again. But worse came at lunchtime, when Marie and Antoinette squealed, "Oh, how pretty!" and whipped out their combs without even noticing the smell. But after a minute, Marie screamed, dropped her comb, and ran away. I looked down and saw it on the ground with a big clump of hair in it, and looked back up to see Antoinette holding the other comb with an even bigger clump. "Go home quick before you die," she croaked, before she too ran off. I ran home as fast as I could, because I did not want to die in the street like that poor dead dog. And after my mother had rewashed, conditioned, and combed through my hair again, I looked in the mirror and thought I would die. My once shoulder-length hair was now patchy and asymmetrical, 10 years before I would wear a similar style as a defiant art student. "We have to cut it off, Nena. It's the only way." So out came the good scissors, and by the time my mom was done, I had what people called a pixie, or close enough. I went back to school. The stink finally faded, and within 2 weeks, new hair started to grow back in. Still wiry, still curly, still orange, but never again at that volume level. And no one played beauty parlor on me ever again. It was a miracle. And another miracle happened. My mother finally stopped fighting with her hair, somewhat, and started using a new Conair blow dryer to create soft waves where once tight coils had been. And when Titi Dulce came over next and saw my mother, she nodded her approval. When she saw me, she didn't even blink. She just hugged me and said, "All revolutions have to end sometime. Choices have to be made. Sometimes it's not easy, but I'm glad to see you're finally making your own." My mother is now in her 80s and wears her soft white hair completely natural. Titi Dulce is in her 70s. She recently chose to stop dyeing her natural chestnut hair and can't wait until it grows back real. As for me, my hair is still just like me. Almost like everybody, exactly like nobody, and it submits to no one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please give one more round of applause to all 4 of our storytellers. What a remarkable group of people. I am so proud to be associated with this remarkable group. And thank you all for giving so generously of your time and your stories to all of us. And now, there is a test. We used to do trivia with sort of literary questions, and then we couldn't think of any anymore. And I said, I want to do stories about weird details in our storytellers. So, because that's how my brain works. So now we get to see how carefully you are listening. And yes, there are fabulous prizes. So
I wanted to take a turn in the chair.
Oh, please do.
I didn't get to do the cool living room set.
I mean, you look good. You
I
look
know,
good in the
right?
chair.
You have the chance to win so that you can start writing your own story. We have these beautiful notebooks, and I've written an individual writing prompt on the first page of each one to kick you off.
Yeah. So
I'm Kelly Jean, by the way. I always forget to introduce myself.
this is Kelly Jean. She is the producer and director of this whole program, and we're all very grateful for all of her hard work. Are you going to look for the hand? Tim, do we need to? Oh, you're taking pictures.
Yes.
Kelly Jean will look for, now, as soon as you think you know the answer, you can raise your hand. Some of these are harder than others. Okay, yeah. So, going back to the beginning of the evening. Wait, I'm on the wrong page. Yes, going back to the beginning of the evening. In the story, no one told me what familiar poster is hanging in the gynecological office.
Cat saying, hang in there.
Yes, the kitty singing, hanging in there. All right. When the narrator starts to become disheartened with Western medicine, where does she turn? Yes. To witchcraft, yes. Many of us have been on that journey, and it continues. Okay. In finally arriving, what is the drink that accompanies the narrator's gender nonconforming epiphany? No, not juice. You have a chance for another one. Yes, the disgusting chocolate espresso martinis. I swear, I remember those from the late 90s. I think they come back every 20 years or so, much like any other weird fashion. Okay.
Storytellers, you're not allowed to guess.
You're not allowed to guess. You know the answers. All right. Little harder. Name just one of the pop culture trans icons cited by the narrator. Yes. Cole from the Fosters. Or the one I was more familiar with, Jazz Jennings from YouTube. All right. You're very good at your job. I know we have a wide audience this time. It's wonderful. All right, moving on. In knowing is half the battle, name just one of the adjectives recklessly used to describe the narrator's uterus. I mean, that's very good. I'm going to go with that. I was actually thinking of the uterus, but knock-kneed, no-lipped fibroids is definitely something that was cited in the book. All right. Close to my heart. Where does the narrator finally find a black female doctor who will listen to her?
Rosalie.
Planned Parenthood! Planned Parenthood. We love Planned Parenthood. All right. In the last story of the evening, Viva la Curlvolution. Name just one of the 12-year-old girls harassing the narrator. Yes. Yes. Very good. I love that the Sicilian girls are named Marie and Antoinette. I knew someone would remember that. And finally, name our favorite character, the troublemaker auntie. Someone will remember. Titi Dulce, yes. Will you please tell Titi Dulce that we love her? So much love to Titi Dulce. Thank you so much. All right.
Oh, and I have a notebook for Erica.
Aw.
This is for, so you get to pick between the two.
I
Or
want
three.
this pink one.
And I want you, I need approval at all time. I want you to read the prompt inside it, just to prove that I did it. But you went away.
Coming back. The prompt. This is an interesting one. At the bottom of Pandora's box, only hope remained. Write about a time in your life that you were challenged. Emotionally, psychologically, physically, but your hope got you through it. Right? That's a very good writing prompt. And just to finish up the evening, this is our 10-year anniversary. Kelly Jean works her ass off to make this show happen. So thank you to her. I am hugely grateful to be part of this process. I feel it is a huge privilege every time I do it. We have recently started paying our creatives, paying our storytellers. We did get a grant, so we're able to do that, but we're also going to pass the proverbial, in this case, literal hat. I brought a witchy hat in honor of Julia. It's got a little point on it. A kid once harassed me on the subway saying, "You're a wizard, Harry." He kept following me, saying, "You're a wizard, Harry." It is a $15 suggested donation. You don't have to give now. We also have a website, knowyoutellit.com. If you donate through there, you can get a tax receipt because we do have an agreement where we are a not-for-profit. Or if you want to chuck a few dollars in either of these hats, you certainly can. If you're not able to support us financially, there are other ways you can support us. You can follow us on all your socials. You can retweet us and re-Facebook us and whatever else it's called. I don't know. All the things. Do all the things. I'm old. I don't know the names. You can sign up for our mailing list. Please support us in any way you can so that we can continue to have wonderful evenings like this. And thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. KJ, do you have last words?
Yeah, last word. Thank you again, everyone, for coming out. The biggest part of my job is finding wonderful people, and what a great job I did tonight. Huge thanks to Erica Iverson, to Marcos, to Julia, Hannah, Michelle, Sheria. And thank you to the space that we're in, Culture Lab, LIC. Check out on their website. They've got so many things going on. Huge thanks to Edjo for helping us have this beautiful production value. I kind of feel like I was joking with him earlier about, we've always been in the backs of bars or tiny bookstores. I feel like Dorothy that stepped out into Oz and everything's in color all of a sudden. So what a wonderful evening. We're gonna, after this, some of us are gonna go hang at LIC bar, which is right around the corner. So you're free to join us. And thank you so much. That's all I have to say. Woo.
Oh, okay. Smile, or should I pretend like I'm reading? Okay. Sorry. You got it, okay.